this idea that there is some kind of external validation that we are going to get if we just work hard enough and do enough things, that we are proving our worth through our productivity. And I heard Erica Chitty Cohen say for the first time that productivity is a trauma response, maybe in 2016 or and her work around that is actually based on another book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And so just we have to go back in lineage, whether you are, tracing back as a person of color, whether you're tracing back as a woman, to really understand the degree to which it has been deeply embedded in our DNA that we are not as worthy. And the ways in which we have tried to prove that we are. Also, the religious programming that says, and maybe not just religious, but like the programming that says, if we suffer enough for a certain amount of time, then we will find salvation. And so with that kind of programming of like deep lineage around unworthiness, and then this whole thing about suffering buys us something, and then like good girl syndrome, we just do too much. Like fundamentally, I was the total classic straight A student, Ivy League, like the whole, thought that was the right. Like if I just turn in my papers on time and get enough A's and get into the right school and then it's going to like buy me. No, it's just like there is nothing at the end of that road if it's not sourced from a deep well of joy within. Now, that connects to this new thought I've been having, which is that I wonder the degree to which our burnout comes from not doing too much, but instead not doing enough of the things that our soul is calling us to do. And like, because we know how hard it is. Like if you, for example, maybe this is a bad example, but I'm going to use it. Like if you have to throw up and you're trying not to, you know how much energy that takes. In my first birth, I was pushing my baby out in an ambulance and I was being told not to push. It was not awesome at all. It was terrible. And yet the baby was coming out of me. Like that was a huge amount of life force coming out of us. I think that for all of us, our work, like with a capital W, our dharma, our purpose, our calling is it's like a certain amount of life force that we are meant to be conduits of if we can open our aperture wide enough, right? And so trying to hold that back because we're scared of how powerful we might become, as you referred to at the beginning, we're scared of what, Aunt Brenda might think. We're scared of like Kathy from third grade who's going to see us on Instagram, like whatever we're scared of. We're scared of being killed because in cultures that is real and certainly has been real for, people in our past lineage. So we hold back and it's freaking exhausting. And so I think we do all these other things like, make sure our, Instagram grid looks the right way or, wash our hair when we really don't feel like it. Just like the bullshit that doesn't matter because we are trying to live up to an external expectation that somebody else has set up for us or just that culture has set up for us. And we think that someday if we do that enough, we're going to be rewarded. And we won't. We'll just die tired. And so I think that's where that comes from. It's like deep programming. And then also a little bit, it is, like I said, with Erica Chitty Cohen, it is a trauma response, which is if we stay busy enough. I mean, there's so many layers there. So I don't know that I can unpack all of them, but one of them would be if I stay busy enough, then I don't have to feel. And because we all know that when we slow down, then we have to feel stuff that we haven't felt in decades. And that's why many people stay so busy.
Yeah. And I think that's a very important point. Like if you do anything to not feel, there's usually a net negative, even if it feels good for a little while. And I will say, because I have almost never been burned out in my life. And people often marvel at that. Like they've asked me like how is that possible? Right. And the only time I came close to burnout was when I was taking care of my stepdad in late stage cancer in home hospice. I had built my coaching certification, sold it, was continuing to actually make it halfway through the year, had to do all the sales calls. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of sales calls for the second certification. And that was the year that I had like many employees and students kind of like, let's just say kindly, like lose the plot. and I was small enough back then. Like now I'm very protected from that because enough people, right? I've had enough employees for 6, 7, 8 years. I've had enough people working for me. I've had enough people go through my programs that you can't just make something up about me anymore because there's enough people with their own lived experience, right?
It's a small, mighty army of us.
Yeah, you can't go and say something fake about me, but you could back then because I had so few people working for me. I had such a low number of students who had ever graduated that like people could be like, well, now it's different. So back then I was like had like the year of like onslaught of like attack. Like it was so wild. And it's so funny. At the end, there was this woman who just really, we couldn't certify her in the program because she didn't have the level of integrity that we needed to certify someone. And we were going to give her a full refund, just be like, sorry, we love you. We feel terrible about this, but like this, like we can't in whatever. And so she was just like, I'm going to go tell all of Facebook what a horrible, evil person you are. And I was like, go right ahead. And so like in all of that, like finally, and like, I like organized, I was like helping with my dad's funeral and I was like doing all the sales calls and I was like crawling to the finish line. And I was like, I think I might be getting close to burnout.
Yeah, could be. Could be. So there is a situation like that where that is like totally not what I was describing.
Right. We're just like
about holding back on your life force. Like that's just too much of life stacking on top of each other.
The waves are just crashing on top of you. So even then though I had enough wherewithal, I was like, I'm going to Nicaragua. Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to like sit in the jungle for a little bit. And I think because I wasn't saying like I just have to keep working harder and harder and harder. I was like, if I ever feel like this, I will rest. If I ever feel like this, I will double the amount of therapy that I'm doing. If I ever feel like this, I will make my breath work and my meditation in the morning 10 times more important. And that helps. But I also feel like I've never worked to avoid the depth of my trauma. I've always faced my trauma as head on as I could. And that makes such a huge difference. And it doesn't mean that I don't want to work because I actually love my dharma. I love what I do. There's something so beautiful and so filling and so nourishing about it. And so that I think is a huge flip for most of us. And I also think it's important to know that I do think that you can work hard and want to work a lot without necessarily being like in massive avoidance or trying to avoid something. And in fact, you could be very like have a huge history of trauma like I do, but actually use like how I set it up was like, I'm going to work so hard that I can always take care of myself. And taking care of myself looks like taking care of my trauma. Like the way that I understand myself is because I have that much trauma, if I want to have a quality of life that I know I deserve, that I know is my soul's truth, I have to work 10 times harder than most people. But I mean 10 times harder at going to therapy, at doing Hoffman, at doing plant medicine, at meditating, because my trauma necessitates that if I want to have a life that I would deem healthy. Right. And so I think for a lot of us, there's this check-in, right, of who we are, how our nervous systems are built, what serves us. So many women that I know actually have woken up to this truth that like, I don't want a huge team.
Yeah.
I don't want to work that hard. I want to run around in the forest and have the best time ever. When they deny themselves that, they're so fucking miserable. And so many women look at me and they're like, how do I build a team like yours? How do I make that much money? How do I do this? And I'm like, honestly, check in with yourself, because for most people, this life would make them miserable. Yeah. They don't want that much responsibility. You don't want to feel this responsible for this many people, right? You don't want this level of payroll, right? We have good benefits and health insurance and, retirement funds and everything like that. Like, who wants to show up for that if that's not your dharma, right? Have one personal assistant, have a great marketing person, right? But simplify, and simplify makes so many people happy. And listening to what your truth is, listening to what your dharma is, right? And being honest with yourself about what your nervous system is, what you really need, what the true calling is, I think is so huge for avoiding burnout. And also, once you have a realization, right? Like after my dad died, he's my stepfather, but he raised me from when I was 1. And I say that to distinguish him from my biological father, who was abusive. My stepfather was wonderful in a lot of ways. And when he died, I remember having like a come to the goddess moment, come to Jesus moment. And as I had that, I was like, I don't need another dollar. I want the most amazing partnership of all time. And I want the most amazing life of all time. And I'm so grateful to my business because it gives me a lot of freedom and a lot of support to pursue those things. So I'm going to continue to do my business. I'm continue to feed it, but I won't maximize it. I think what can happen sometimes is when you're not in honest truth with yourself, you would say, I'm scared right now. I'm in grief. I deeply want a partnership, but I don't have it. Instead of feeling the discomfort of all of that, I'm just going to work more and more and more. And in working more and more and more, I get more and more tired because I'm not feeding the thing that's true. And so I love this definition of burnout that it's almost like it has a lot to do with doing what's true. If it's true to heal your trauma, focus on that. If it's true to fall in love and get married, focus on that. If it's true to have kids, focus on that. And never lie to yourself and say that an additional amount of success or fame or impact or Instagram followers is going to make anything better if you're not doing what's true.
It's not.
Yeah.
And like the reason I wrote Do Less, not so that people can just sit around. Cause like, quite frankly, nobody really wants to do that after a certain amount of time. Like if you're really burned out, like totally sit around for a while.
Yeah.
And then there will be a moment when you'll want to do something and then you'll know. But it's do less so you can do more of what matters.
Yeah.
Right. So it's do less of the stuff that doesn't matter so you can be there for your stepdad on his deathbed. So you can be there for the moments like when you are going to meet your person, when, so that you can be there and stay home on maternity leave if you want to do that, whatever. Just, it's like about choices and not getting so caught in the same delusion that we were talking about with money, which is that something that there's a there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all the ultimate illusion is that there's a there. Yeah. And like, it's gotta be here. It's gotta be here. And so, I love what you're talking about with your own experience of burnout. I had a very similar, the only time I've been burned out was when my husband was really sick and we had just moved to Miami sort of suddenly, unexpectedly. And I was like suddenly paying for private school unexpectedly and 2 households, like, because we kind of moved in retroactively. It was a weird situation. And I really had to admit, like, I'm burned out. All I want to do is lay on the couch and cry all day. Yeah. And I needed to let parts of me die and do more of healing my trauma and honestly do more resting because I was just fucking tired. As opposed to like, and here's the magical thing. And this is really applicable for those who are feeling like, because this is common, be like, I can't do less because if I do less, I won't make enough money to meet my needs, to meet my family's needs, to pay my team, to pay the mortgage or the rent or whatever. And I was very much in that place. I was like, my business partner, my husband is down for the count and it is up to me. And if I don't show up and do the jazz hands and like make it all happen, it's not happening. And then I have to fire everybody and all these people depend on me. And then, we'll lose our, like all right. And my kids don't eat, right? But we had this moment with our therapist and he said to me, he was like, okay, close your eyes. So I closed my eyes. And he said, okay, so imagine Mike has just come home and he has said to you, babe, I just got $10 million. And so you just don't have to do anything. And David, our therapist, said, okay, so what do you feel inside? And I was like, holy shit, I cannot believe that I'm about to say this. And he said, well, what is it? What are you feeling? And I said, I feel dead. I feel dead inside. And I realized that I was operating using stress and pressure as my primary fuel source. And I knew that I couldn't raise two little girls like that. Like, and I couldn't be the kind of partner, I couldn't be the kind of woman I want to be living like that. And I didn't even realize I was living that way. It was kind of horrifying, especially given the work that I do. It was deeply embarrassing. It's like, oh God, I am not following any of my own advice. And I knew in that moment, I was like, okay, well, I got to try something else. So I did a radical experiment and I said, okay, I'm just going to give myself 90 days. And during this 90 days, it'll be 90 days or a certain amount of money that I'm comfortable going in the hole because I know like I can turn around and make that if I need to. So I'll just give myself 90 days or this amount of money in the hole. Whichever one comes first will be my stopgap. But until then, I am not allowed to work in a pressured way. And I'm not allowed to push. And we hit all our financial goals and everything was fine. I never went back. Basically, I just was like, I have no evidence that now is a good time to do less or relax, but I'm just going to do it anyway and see what happens. And we made more money and have continued to ever since. And so if you're listening and feeling like I can't do less, everything will fall apart, I might just invite you to do an experiment, because what's wild from a financial perspective is that relaxation is incredibly magnetic. And when we're so caught in doing from this sense of martyrdom or obligation or pressure or like, well, I just have to have a lot going on, and we're using it as a stimulant, it actually can be blocking the flow of opportunity and abundance that actually really wants to come in, but everything's so tight that it can't.